To the Point with Kelly Dunn and Michael Williams.
Palm Beach County State Attorney Michael McAuliffe could be facing some stiff competition in his run for re-election, and it could come from fellow Democrat Dave Ehrenberg.
Good morning and Merry Christmas. Michael Williams is out today enjoying some time off. We hope you are enjoying your Christmas day with your family and friends, and we're hoping to bring you a little political entertainment this morning. And who better than to entertain us than our favorite To the Point friends that are joining us today, political analyst and coordinator of the American Studies program at Lynn University, Dr. Robert Watson, and Brian Crowley, author of CrowleyPoliticalReport.com. Merry Christmas and welcome.
Happy holidays. Well, I brought my white beard with me.
Exactly.
In the spirit of Christmas.
Which I seem to recall in June.
That's right.
It's always Christmas with Brian.
Exactly.
It's in the spirit of giving.
Exactly. And you have the red tie, Robert, so
unlike the Congress, we're in the spirit of giving around here.
Oh, isn't that the truth? All right, let's begin with this. What could be an entertaining show for political watchers and a showdown for the Democrats? First-term state attorney, Michael McAuliffe is looking to run for re-election next year. It's unusual to get competition in your own party, but that is exactly what could happen. Former State Senator Dave Ehrenberg could challenge him. And George Bennett, the political reporter with the Palm Beach Post and an occasional guest on To the Point, is reporting McAuliffe already conducted a poll about Ehrenberg, and Ehrenberg scores well in it. Ehrenberg said he will announce his decision in January. How nervous, though, does this make the Democratic Party in Palm Beach County? What do you think, Brian?
Well, I mean, here you have two up-and-comers in the Democratic Party, in a party that has a shortage of up-and-comers.
Yes.
And, you know, we're sort of, with Dave Ehrenberg, getting a replay of what happened with his AG race last year, where he was running against Dan Gelber, another up-and-comer. So right now the Democrats seem to be eating their young, which is a little surprising. But I mean, whatever polling is done about this race at this stage is kind of silly polling. Nobody's paying any attention to this race. But, you know, there are some issues that have happened with the McAuliffe's office that I think are going to be very interesting in the year ahead.
Yeah, you know, the Democrats, especially here in Florida, are famous for forming circular firing squads and snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. But there's this, here in Florida, with both the Democratic and Republican Party, there's been this sort of ethos. They don't want competitive primaries. Let's wait your turn. The party try to line people up. We don't want competitive primaries. Let me play both sides. On one hand, I think that's wrong. The myth is that competitive primaries are bad for the party, bad for the candidate. That's not true. There's no statistical evidence. In fact, I think competitive primaries, as long as they're reasonably civil, are good. The candidates get to test drive the message. They're much better debaters. And in the marketplace of ideas, you go forward with your best ideas. Now, having said that, I agree with Brian completely. These are two of the rising stars in the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party in Florida and in South Florida has no bench. I mean, they're thin. It's a shame for the Democrats that probably two of their brightest stars have to meet head-to-head, and this could be a really serious race. It could take money away from Democrats in other races. Even though Ehrenberg is well-liked and the polls early on suggested he would win, don't count McAuliffe out. He's got a lot of support in the area as well, and is a good politician and a good campaigner.
All right, from a couple of Democrats, let's go to a Republican. Senator Marco Rubio is finishing his first full year in the Senate. He's keeping a low profile, but that's probably going to change next year. He is the shining star for the Republicans. Just how much of an impact will he have next year? How big of a player is Marco Rubio?
Well, potentially huge. I mean, there's already, as we all know, a lot of talk this past year about Marco Rubio, a very junior senator, possibly being on the Republican ticket, depending on who the nominee is. I think that you know, if he were to be on the Republican ticket, he would be a very powerful influence in helping to win Florida over and get its 29 electoral votes to the Republican Party. That would put a lot of pressure on Barack Obama and the Democrats. And Marco Rubio, I think, has had a pretty good year. It's been relatively low-key. He's stepped out on occasion on some national issues, but it's been very measured. And I think he's been determined to make himself first look like he's a working senator.
Yeah, I agree completely. We've said it before on this show, and if I'm advising any one of the Republicans running for president, I say put Rubio at the top of your short list for vice president. In many ways, Rubio is the Republicans' Obama. He's young, he's charismatic, he's a heck of a fundraiser, does good in front of an audience. Rubio also isn't damaged or tainted goods, if you will, like a lot of the other Republicans in Congress right now. He's managed, as Brian correctly noted, to stay apart from it. Plus, in 2012, most everybody realizes that perhaps the biggest swing demographic in the country will be the Latino vote. And Rubio, you know, the guy looks like Ricky Martin. He's Latino. He's got a heck of a story. So he could play a key role there. The only two, and he has played it safe, he's had 2 minor bumps, but he seems to have weathered them both. The idea that he was embellishing his family's story a bit, but he seems to have survived that. And one issue that does bring up, Rubio will bring in the Cuban-American vote here to the Republican Party, but how will we do among other Latino voting segments around the country? He's had a little trouble recently with the Puerto Rican community on the I-4 corridor. Rubio has been holding up an ambassadorial appointment of someone who's of Puerto Rican descent, and folks are a bit upset with him there. So it's a little too early, but Rubio seems to have weathered the little bumps in his career pretty well.
Would he be better, though, to stay in the Senate and just build more of a career as a senator? I don't know, one day run for president or something, or or should he jump in this soon if he is tapped to be?
Well, he has nothing to lose. It's not like he'll lose a Senate seat.
True.
If he runs on the ticket, if he gets on the ticket as vice presidential candidate, and he loses, he goes back to the Senate with several years in front of him to recover from that loss. So it's not likely they would blame him for the loss, and this is a win-win for him no matter what he does, even if he doesn't get on the ticket and by his own choosing, or if he's not asked. I'd be surprised if he's not on the short list. I think Robert would be surprised as well. You know, as long as he continues the sort of path he has now, I think that Rubio will continue to be a rock star into 2012.
I agree. I mean, in politics, perception is reality. So even the fact that we and everyone else has been floating his name, it's built his stature. He's now a household name around the country, clearly in the state. If he runs and loses, he won't be blamed for it. Even if he isn't picked as VP, I mean, the perception is he's become a statesman and a player in the party. So he gets the committee assignments he wants. He's a powerful player. You know, if I'm Rubio, I see both sides of it. You know, if you run, you're not going to be held responsible for a loss. But on the other hand, this is a tough year. Everybody knows the economy's not going to get a whole lot better. The Republicans could lose this thing. Even if they win, a win could be a loss because somebody's going to inherit this economic mess. But he could stay away from this, kind of rise above it. Why be second banana when in another couple of years you're top banana? And you could be looking at a future president here. But I do think it's a win-win for Rubio. He had a good year. 2011 overall, despite the bumps, was a good year for Rubio.
So if Rubio is the shining star for Republicans, well, then Bill Nelson is the single star for the Democrats. He is the only Democrat to hold statewide office, and he is up for re-election next year. Are the Democrats strong enough in this state, though, to keep Bill Nelson in office?
Well, Bill Nelson is a seasoned and very tough campaigner. This is a man who ran unsuccessfully for governor against Lawton Chiles. He's been insurance commissioner. He was in Congress. He's in his 3rd term as senator. I mean, and he's not a liberal Democrat as many people think of a liberal. This is you know, Florida. He's that generation of Florida politicians where conservative Democrats, you know, the party was divided up between conservative Democrats and liberal Democrats. Republicans just didn't matter. So, you know, he comes at this with a reputation that's less liberal than the Republicans would like to paint him. He's also from the Orlando area, the key swing area. So, and Republicans that I speak to, you know, political operatives, you know, they're very honest in saying that they think they can beat Bill Nelson, but they don't pretend that in any way it's going to be easy. They think it's going to be very tough to defeat Bill Nelson.
I think Brian, as usual, spot on. Bill Nelson is absolutely a centrist. In a normal year, if we were to just do a hypothetical, a seasoned senator who's a moderate from a moderate state, who has a long political resume, will somebody dislodge them? The answer is no way. You know, pigs will fly first. But this is not a normal year, and everyone's vulnerable. And we saw 2010 was a big seat change here in Florida, with the Republicans winning all 5 of the statewide races in the last election, picking up seats in our congressional delegation, picking up seats at the state rep and state senator level, local level. So Florida's taken a tilt to the right. Also, since 2004, there's 2008, I'm sorry, 2008, there's a 5% decline in Democratic voter registration in Florida, and a lot more independents. Now, you think that maybe that would benefit Nelson with the independents because he is a centrist, but this is one of those years, who knows what can happen. And boy, wouldn't the Republicans symbolically like to knock off about the last standing Democrat in Florida. So there's going to be a lot of money pumped into this race from both sides.
Let's talk about Congressman Connie Mack. Made a big splash when he announced that he's getting into the race, easily topping the other Republican candidates in the polls. How much will his name recognition, how far will it take him?
It should raise him a lot of money. It's not necessarily going to win him the election, but, you know, the first step at this stage of an election is raising a lot of money. We'll know sometime in mid-January whether or not he's had a successful quarter in raising money. You know, when Connie Mack got into the race, he ruined the Christmas holidays for all the other candidates because he had indicated earlier this year that he was not going to get in the race. So George Lemieux, Adam Hasner thought they had the race to themselves, but they don't. And Connie Mack is a serious threat to those guys.
Absolutely. You know, at the least, we can all agree that it won't hurt him. That name won't hurt him. It's good to run down here with a name like Mack. His father held that seat. Plus, the family name, his father and his grandfather, a lot of goodwill toward them. And there's still a lot of folks, particularly older voters, who have a lot of respect and goodwill toward the parent or the grandparent, and that passes down. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree sometimes. Plus, I think he also benefits from the fact that, as with the Republican race nationally for president, nobody seems to be getting the party excited. So by definition of being a new person coming in, you seem to be the outsider, if it's possible for a Mack to be an outsider. But he's sort of the new guy. He's not tainted. He's a fresh face. So he's got that little bit, he's got that interest, that wow factor for now going on. So I do agree. I think his first 2 quarters over the winter and spring, we'll have to see how his fundraising does. You know, the Mack family holiday card mailing list alone should be able to bring us a couple million.
Can you imagine how extensive that is?
Yeah, I think I'm even on that list.
All right, stay right there. We're talking about a couple of congressional races when we come back. Welcome back to our special Christmas Day edition of To The Point, where we are looking at some of the more interesting political figures and events. And clearly, one of the most interesting politicians in our area is Republican Congressman Allen West. He got into a dust-up with Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, which his fellow Republicans enjoyed. More recently, he linked the Democrats to Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels. He was asked to run for the Senate, but decided against it. How big of a role do you see Allen West playing in Florida politics this year?
You know, Allen West is this wild card of you never know what's going to come out of his mouth. And the idea that he would compare the Democratic Party in Congress to a Nazi propagandist, especially a guy who lives in South Florida, where, you know, 20% of the population is Jewish, and they rightfully get offended.
In the area.
Survivors in this area. And, you know, I thought when the Democrats tried to have him censured on the House floor, that was a little silly. But, you know, I don't know how Allen West, on the one hand, can look people in the eye and say, we need to get up to D.C. and work things out, and then say those kinds of things about the people that he needs to work things out with. Where do you compromise after a statement like that? I mean, if all you're interested in doing is throwing bombs instead of sitting down with your opposition and compromising, for people, you know, one of the things I find frustrating about this Congress is you hear a lot of these folks talk fondly about, you know, the founding fathers of this country. Well, they clearly don't know their American history. This country would not have been here, as Robert certainly knows, without, you know, years of brutal compromising over issues like slavery and a host of other issues. And so this non-compromise has nothing to do with how this country was founded.
Yeah, you know, I mean, Allen West always talks about the founders. He talks about his hero, Ronald Reagan. He talks about Eisenhower. All these folks were known to be compromised. You have to compromise. They were known to sit down. This is not the first inflammatory remark. You can go after someone. We're adults here, and if you're in Congress, you have to be able to step up and take the heat. But you can go after someone, but you know, the Holocaust and the Nazis should only be invoked for just the most horrific crimes, not something casual. This is absurd. This is absolutely absurd. You know, one of the big challenges, I think, for all politicians, especially novices like Congressman West, is they have to transition from election mode to governing mode. During election mode, you say stuff like that to get the publicity. During governing mode, you have to govern. He never seems to have made that transition, but you know, it hasn't seemed to hurt him. I think
that's what I was going to say. Is that hurting him at all?
You know, the virtue virtue of Allen West and the vice of Allen West are one and the same. You never know what he's going to say, which is a breath of fresh air, and his supporters love that inning, and his detractors hate that inning. So it hasn't seemed to hurt him. He's a national name. He's an effective fundraiser. He probably
we don't know what his district's going to look like yet.
That's the thing.
Right,
Congressional districts.
Nor does he know what it's going to look like. Right.
You know, in one map, he had a few more Democrats than he had the last time.
So would that force him to, but is Allen West, you know, we've had him on the show, and he's articulate, he's an intelligent person. I've always scratched my head trying to make something of him. I've met him several times and talked to him. We have a civil conversation, and then he turns around and talks about, you know, the Democrats are enslaving blacks and Obama's a slave master. I mean, just crazy comments. So, well, it wouldn't be a typical
Maybe he
year
just likes being quoted.
There are two Democrats looking to defeat Allen West, political newcomer Patrick Murphy and former West Palm Beach Mayor Lois Frankel. She was supposed to be the main opponent, but Murphy is doing well in the fundraising category, and we really haven't heard too much from Lois Frankel, which is uncharacteristic. What should we be looking for, though, as this race develops in the new year?
Well, I mean, I've covered many of Lois's races over the years, reported on them, and, you know, I'm not surprised she's a little quiet right now because I think she's concentrating on raising money, which she's going to have to do. Murphy has raised almost matched her dollar for dollar along the way on this. When you run against Lois Frankel, you're going into the lion's den. She eats her young, and this will be a brutal campaign. She doesn't know how to campaign any other way, and from Murphy's standpoint, it's almost, if he runs a respectable race, win or lose, I think there's some people who see him as an up-and-coming young Democrat, and that this is sort of, you know, testing the waters for him. And he'll have a lot to use with Lois Frankel. She's got, you know, 25, 30 years of political record behind her and lots of votes, including as mayor of West Palm Beach. So it'll be a fascinating race to watch.
You know, a lot of us political watchers, we're looking forward to a West Frankel showdown. Both have similar temperaments in many ways, and this was going to be a powder keg kind of a race. But she's got to get past Murphy first. I agree with you. He's surprised a lot of people. He's a part of the process. It's back to that point I made earlier about a competitive primary. He could make her a better candidate. He could make himself a better candidate. And I think he has a future either way beyond this. But, you know, she really has had a low profile. You know, some people think that, some bloggers have been suggesting, with Allen West and with the anti-incumbent mood, just don't trip and fall. Just stay out of the way. He'll have enough rope to hang himself. But I don't think so. What I am surprised is that she's not going out in more of a moderating, center-of-the-road position and being more vocal, because this district, right now, who knows what it's going to look like, but right now it's almost a third Democrat, third Republican, and a third independent. It's your perfect bellwether district, which leaves a lot of room for her to not only get the Democrats who can't stand West, but the moderates, I think, are in play, because West is going so far to the right. So either way, I mean, we're going to have a fascinating primary, and it'll be a fascinating general election here.
Certainly is. Coming up, a look at a couple of presidential campaigns that made news this year, but won't be making it next year.
With a lot of prayer and soul searching, I am suspending my presidential campaign.
After a series of allegations of sexual harassment and a claim of an affair, Herman Cain ended his 999 campaign for the White House. A successful businessman who ran for president, I don't think he expected that it was going to end this way. What can we take away from Herman Cain's campaign? What do you think, Robert?
Well, I think on one hand, it's the first major political speech given in mirror sunglasses, which is quite something. But we need to remember it's Florida that launched Herman Cain. And a lot of leading Florida Republicans said the winner of that early Florida straw poll is the person who's going to win the election. So much for that early Florida straw poll.
Exactly.
And of course, if there's ever a year when it didn't matter, it was this year. I think, you know, Herman Cain, you talk about it was Herman train wreck. It was just one allegation after another and soiled the campaign. And he handled it textbook how not to. I think the only ones that are going to miss Herman Cain in his campaign would be Jon Stewart, Jay Leno, and the late night
they
comedians.
Will miss him.
But they still have Rick Perry.
That's true. Any quick comment on Herman Cain?
Well, you know, he was a fascinating character to watch during this election year, but in some ways it was more fascinating to watch the voters, because as you got deeper and deeper into Herman Cain, you found out he didn't know that much about the issues. He wasn't as well prepared, and you wound up wondering, what are voters seeing in this guy? And it says a lot about the mood of the electorate.
A surprise gift for Professor Watson coming up after this. This is the time we usually devote to the Crowley closer, which we so affectionately named and enjoy every week. We're going to have a Watson winner today, though.
Okay.
It's a little Christmas gift for Dr. Watson.
Does it mean I have to grow a beard? At the end of the year, I always like to figure out, like Santa's list, who's been naughty and who's been nice. Yeah. This year, clearly, Congress gets the naughty award. 8 times they had to try to pass a budget, a temporary resolution. They couldn't get together on jobs creation. They couldn't get together on deficit reduction. They couldn't get together to prevent our credit from being downgraded. At 11% approval, they're the big loser. I think the winner, if I was Time Magazine, my winner of the year, the American soldier, the war in Iraq is now officially over. Iraq, one of the longest wars in American history. The American soldier did what we asked of them, and what a holiday present for the families of the American men and women in uniform.
Absolutely. We do have time for a small closer.
Well, if you've opened up your brand new computer this morning, I urge you to go to Channel 5's FloridaDemocracy.com, where you have a list of Christmas gifts that have been suggested by former Congressman Mark Foley, Senate President Mike Haradopoulos, and a whole bunch of other folks. So I highly recommend taking a look. It's funny.
So once you plug in that computer and get it up and running, now you know where to go. Thank you very much, Brian Crowley and Robert Watson, for joining us, and Merry Christmas to you. Christmas. Merry Christmas, and thank you for spending part of your holiday with us. We'll see you next weekend on To The Point.